Welcome to the TLC, the Life Coach Podcast with Matt Halloran. Every week, one of the world's top life coaches, Matt Halloran, will share his wisdom through stories and ideas to help you live the best life possible. Success is only a podcast away. Now please welcome your host, Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to another podcast. I've had a pretty heavy thing on my mind for the last couple of weeks. Really has to do with fate. If you study DNA and if you study genetics, well, and honestly, if you just look at children, if they're yours or even your cousins, nieces, or nephews, you'll start seeing things behaviorally and physically that defy any sort of nature versus nurture sort of situation. Are we just products of fate? So this is what I've been wrestling with, and you know, as a coach, you get these questions a lot because you're trying to work, well, through people like you through interesting growth opportunities in life. Coaches generally focus on the positive and life-affirming things that will bring out appropriate change. And so I've had these people who have come back and forth with me with situations in their life that just seem so out of their control and so fate-based, or things that just happen without any sort of nurture or nature or control. And it's a difficult thing to talk to clients about because you have to be very cognizant or aware of their spiritual and philosophical underpinnings, so what they believe, what their life experiences have been leading up to these deep philosophical questions. And so this person who I was working with was talking about the difference between how much control she truly has over her life. And my response is the same. It's been very consistent over the last 10 or 15 years, which I'm hoping is right because it's the advice that I give on a regular basis and the guidance that I try to provide, which is you can live a life full of fate. Everybody who's listening to this knows that if you rescind all control over everything that you're doing, you will live by fate. If you don't take control, if you don't focus, if you don't stand up and puff your chest out and walk forward towards something unknown and scary, you will live your life by the hands of others, which is what I call fate. Fate is not something that is done by nature. Fate is something that is done by people. It is not fate when a tornado hits your house. It is not fate when a river overflows. You probably should have thought about where you lived if you were in a floodplain. That's taking control. Now, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to move. I understand that, and I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying when somebody says on the news, "Why did my house float away?" and they're dead center in a river bend in a floodplain, they're allowing fate to happen instead of taking control. We have these things on our shoulders that are these unbelievable computers. They're this squishy, yucky, pinkish sort of thing that's floating around in our skull that allows us to make unbelievable calculations and decisions. But instead of listening to what's going on in your head, you would rather listen to somebody else. You would rather give up that control. I don't want anybody listening to this podcast to give up control. In fact, every podcast that I've done up to this point is meant to empower. Every podcast that I've done up to this point has been an opportunity for you to start looking at the world a little bit differently and realizing that you are a vital component of every single solitary thing that surrounds you. You impact everything and at all times, even if you don't want to. Why would you let life happen? Why wouldn't you make life happen? Sometimes I give assignments on these podcasts, and sometimes I don't. Since most of you are not active life coaching clients of mine, because if you were, you would be getting these assignments on a regular basis. But I want you to grab a piece of paper at your convenience, preferably not while you're driving, if you're listening to our podcast while you're driving. And I want you to write down a list of things that you think are outside of your control. It is very, very true that there are some people who start way ahead of the starting line than others. And I am not saying that we live on an even playing field. But no matter how much control you can take in your life, you can take some control. The only reasons why you can't take some control over aspects of your life is because you choose not to take that control. You choose to allow fate to take control over aspects of your life. You choose to deny the power that you have inside of you to make conscious choices, to make changes within your life. Some of the greatest changes you will ever make to combat fate are terrifying. Some of them aren't. Some of them are just scary enough where you're not going to make that move, take that step. Read that book. Learn something new. Challenge a closely held belief. Move away from negative people. A small step in the right direction is progress. I'm not telling anybody on the podcast to make massive sweeping changes in their life all at once, because we know that that doesn't stick. Slow, gradual improvement, kaizen, which is the Japanese word for slow, continuous improvement, is how you get better, how you make change, how you make change stick. Anybody who's ever lost an enormous amount of weight and they lose it super duper fast without a lot of effort, they gain the weight back. But those people who put in the time and slowly trudge towards their weight loss goals will keep that weight off for so much longer, if not permanently, because they have a vested interest in taking control and not allowing fate to rule their lives. I want you to write those things down. And then I want you to write things down talking about the chances that you could take, the changes that you could make, the movement that would just make a small difference in your life to start heading yourself in the right direction, away from the lack of control, away from fate. Some of the greatest things I've ever had any of my clients do were utterly terrifying for them. We had a podcast all about homeostasis and equilibrium, about whatever your normal becomes is what your normal is. So if your life is full of horrible experiences and that's the way that your life has been, that is your normal. And the only way you get out of that rut is by realizing you're in a rut and getting out of it. Until you look at fate, look it in the eye and say, I am not subservient to you. I am not giving myself to you. I am taking control of my life. Things won't change. I'm so tired and frustrated of all of these self-help books that has the secret to making major changes within your life. There is no secret, people. It's not a secret. You know what you need to do to make changes in your life. Even if they're small changes heading you once again in the direction that you want to go, you know deep down inside all you have to do is take control and listen. Stop buying self-help books. Stop trying outside of yourself to find the answers to making change within yourself, because it doesn't exist outside of yourself, because that book does not know you. I don't know you. I know that all you have to do is take control. And I'm not saying it's easy. I've read hundreds of those books. I've written hundreds of blogs on this. Hell, I've done podcasts on this. It all comes back to one thing, which is why this podcast was weighing so heavy on my heart and my mind, because change only comes with change. Change has to have effort. There has to be a specific amount of input to have the same or more or less amount of output. My wife is a science teacher, a biology teacher. So I learn stuff every day. I'm not a biologist. I didn't really study a lot of science in college. I was a philosophy major. So I was trying to figure out why things happened, not what happened. And my wife was explaining something about, this potential and kinetic energy. And it just came back to exactly what I'm talking about with fate. You can have this passive energy that just allows your gray, lifeless, unproductive body to go through society, or you can light it on fire and become this beacon of light and truth and energy and positivity. You can impact everybody around you. You're either going to do it positively or you're going to do it negatively. Unfortunately, there's really no middle road, because if you don't think you're making a difference and you're just walking around as a gray speck on this earth, somebody like me is going to notice you. And that will affect me, because I'm here to wake those specks up. I'm here to turn that gray existence into one of beauty and color and light. I don't have a miracle cure, but I think you do. I think if you look deeply inside yourself and quiet your mind and listen, things will start appearing. Things will start happening in your brain that make you aware of the things that you need to do. But that is even more work than you need to do, because you probably just wrote down on a piece of paper all of those little things that you think are fate, that you're not taking control of. And if you haven't, just start writing. Open your head, close your mouth, close your eyes, unless you really need to look at what you're writing, and just write those things down. There are so many things in everybody's life who's listening to this podcast that they have just written off as fate. I'll give you a perfect example. I found out I was going to go bald when I was about 16 years old. Now people would say that that's fate. It's fate that Matt became bald. And is it fate? No, it's genetics. Now, could I have done something about it? You're darn right I could have done something about it. When I was young, they had this new product called Rogaine. Now, it might have grown hair on my hands, but that's not really the point. I could have reclaimed my hair. I can go to Bosley Hair Treatment and get a full head of luxurious hair. And if I just said to myself, you know what, I'm going to just throw my hands up in the air and give up and say, you know what, I'm going to hate the fact that I'm bald, that I can't do anything about it. That's fate. That's no control. But instead, I remember when I was 26 years old and I looked in the mirror. And I'd been shaving my head for a long time because I thought it was ridiculous to look like Bozo the Clown. And for those of you who don't know who Bozo the Clown is, please Google it, because that is exactly what I would look like if I didn't shave my head. And I took control of the situation. I took control of my balding, embraced it as something beautiful, and everything changed for me from a self-esteem standpoint. I know you have those things too. We all do. We're all human. Everybody has something in their life that they have just written off as fate. For those of you who are listening to this on Facebook or who have taken the time to subscribe to the podcast, I thank you very, very much. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please just click the subscribe button below. And if you do have an opportunity to provide me with a review, I'd like it. I'd be very grateful because I'd love to hear some feedback. But if you haven't followed me on Facebook, and if you just look up my name and Personal Telescope, I have a Facebook page. And you can respond to this podcast. It's going to show up on that page anyway. So after you listen to the podcast, if there's something that you say, you know what, Matt, you're wrong. This is something in my life that I cannot take control of. I would absolutely love to hear what it is. Because as far as I'm concerned, fate is a perspective. Fate is not an actual thing. Post on Facebook, hey, how do I get control of this? Or how do I make a change with this? Let's start getting engaged. Let's start having a conversation. Because that's how life changes. And even if you don't want to have that conversation with me, which is totally fine. You guys don't really know me, I understand. Have that conversation with somebody that you love and trust. Go to your best friend in the world and say, how do I change this? How do I stop this tape from playing in my head? How do I make it so that fate does not rule my life? And that person will look at you and probably have a huge smile on their face because they have been waiting for you to ask them that question. Just like I'm waiting for you to answer those questions or to ask those questions to me. Screw fate. Take control and live your life the best way you possibly can, because this is the one life you have here on this planet, in this body, at this time. Paying attention to what happens tomorrow or years from now or after you die allows you to lose control over what you're doing right now in this moment. And if you take control of this moment, you take control of fate, you take control of your life, and you then will become that beam of color and light that can make this world a better place.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to listen to our podcast. Remember, a single change, no matter how big or small, can start you on your path to live your best life possible. You deserve it. We will see you on the other side of the mic soon. Have a wonderful day.